Have you ever noticed something strange? Ask someone what they would do if they suddenly became wealthy, and most people will immediately start making a shopping list. A bigger house, a luxury car, expensive vacations, designer clothes, maybe even a private jet. Now, ask someone who has spent decades building wealth, and you'll often hear completely different answers. They don't immediately think about what to buy. They think about what to build, what to own, what to protect, what to grow. So here's the real question. Do rich people become wealthy because they think differently? Or do they think differently because they became wealthy? The answer is much more fascinating than it seems. Hello, I'm Olivia Vale. Welcome to Nexarhythm. If you're interested in understanding money, business, psychology, economics, and the hidden systems shaping modern life, make sure to subscribe. Every week, we explore the ideas that separate ordinary thinking from extraordinary outcomes, helping you understand not only how money works, but how successful people often think about it. And I'd really encourage you to stay until the end of this video, because the final lesson isn't about becoming rich overnight. It's about discovering one mindset shift that quietly separates people who spend their entire lives chasing money from those who eventually make money work for them. Today, we're going to explore why wealthy people often see the world differently. Not because they're born smarter, not because they have some secret formula, but because over time, they begin asking different questions. They make different decisions. They notice opportunities that others overlook. And perhaps most importantly, they stop playing the same financial game as everyone else. Because once you understand how wealthy people actually think, you stop asking, how can I own more money? And you begin asking something far more powerful. How can I create more value? The biggest difference isn't money, it's perspective. Let me ask you something. Imagine you suddenly receive $1 million. What would be the very first thing you do? Take a moment to think about it. Would you buy a bigger house, a luxury car, travel the world, quit your job? Or would your first thought be something completely different? The answer to that question reveals more than most people realize. Because money doesn't simply change what people can do. It often exposes how they already think. And that's one of the biggest differences between people who build wealth and people who simply spend it. Most people see money as the destination. Wealthy people often see it as a tool. That difference sounds small, but over a lifetime, it changes everything. Think about a hammer. A hammer has no value by itself unless someone knows how to use it. Money works in much the same way. In the hands of one person, it disappears. In the hands of another, it creates businesses, assets, opportunities, and even more money. The amount may be the same. The mindset is completely different. This is why two people can inherit exactly the same fortune and end up with completely different futures. One protects it. One multiplies it. The other slowly spends it until very little remains. We've seen this happen countless times. Lottery winners who become bankrupt within a few years. Professional athletes who earn millions during their careers, only to struggle financially after retirement. Successful entrepreneurs who lose everything and then quietly build it all again. At first glance, those stories seem completely unrelated, but they all point toward the same conclusion. Money is temporary. The ability to create value is permanent. And wealthy people eventually understand that. They stop believing wealth exists inside a bank account. Instead, they believe wealth exists inside knowledge, skills, relationships, experience, and the ability to solve valuable problems. That's why many entrepreneurs who lose everything eventually recover. They didn't lose their way of thinking. They only lost the money. And once they begin creating value again, money often follows. Now, compare that with someone who believes money itself is the source of security. If they lose their savings, they often feel they've lost everything. Not because they lack ability, but because their confidence was attached to the money instead of the skills that created it. That's a powerful psychological difference, and perhaps it's one of the least discussed. Because confidence built on possessions disappears when possessions disappear. Confidence built on capability tends to stay. There's another difference that's even more interesting. Most people ask questions like, how much does this cost? Can I afford this? When will I get paid? Those are perfectly normal questions. But many wealthy people gradually begin asking different ones. What problem does this solve? Will this create value 5 years from now? Is this an expense or an investment? Will this decision increase my future options? Notice the shift. The conversation moves away from price and toward value. That's important because price and value are not always the same thing. Something can be expensive, yet incredibly valuable. Another thing can be cheap, yet cost you years of lost opportunity. A book might cost very little, yet completely transform the way you think. An unnecessary purchase might seem harmless, yet slowly drain thousands over time. The wealthy don't automatically avoid spending. They simply become much more selective about why they spend. They understand that every financial decision has an opportunity cost. Every dollar spent on one thing cannot be used somewhere else. Every hour invested in one activity is an hour unavailable for another. Time, money, attention. To them, these are all investments, and investments should produce returns. Not always financial returns. Sometimes better health. Sometimes stronger relationships. Sometimes new knowledge. Sometimes greater freedom. But always some form of long-term value. This way of thinking changes everyday decisions. Instead of asking, will this make me look successful? They begin asking, will this move me closer to the life I'm trying to build? That's a completely different mindset. And over 20 or 30 years, those small differences quietly become extraordinary differences. Perhaps that's why wealthy thinking often appears so simple. It's not about secret formulas. It's not about complicated financial tricks. It's about consistently seeing the world through a different lens. A lens focused less on immediate pleasure and more on long-term value. Because in the end, wealth doesn't usually begin with a larger income. It begins with a different perspective. And once your perspective changes, your decisions begin to change. Then your habits, then your opportunities, and eventually, your future. Which leads to an even more interesting question. If perspective shapes financial success so deeply, where does that perspective actually come from? Because nobody is born thinking like an investor. Nobody is born thinking like an entrepreneur. Those ways of thinking are learned. And understanding how they're learned may be one of the most valuable lessons of all. The questions wealthy people ask that most people never do. Here's something I've noticed over the years. The people who become financially successful aren't always the ones with the highest IQ. They're often the ones asking better questions. That may sound too simple, but think about it. Every decision begins with a question, and the quality of your answers can never be better than the quality of the questions you ask. Most people ask questions that focus on the present. Can I afford this? How much does it cost? When do I get paid? There's nothing wrong with those questions. The problem is, They rarely change your future. Now compare them to the questions many wealthy people ask. What happens if I don't buy this? Will this decision still make sense 5 years from now? How can this asset create value over time? What problem does this solve? Is this making me richer or simply making me look richer? Notice something? The focus shifts away from today and toward tomorrow. That's one of the biggest psychological differences between consumers and wealth builders. Consumers often focus on spending. Wealth builders often focus on outcomes. Imagine two friends walking into the same shopping mall. The first sees products. The second sees businesses. The first notices the new shoes. The second wonders how many pairs the company sells every day. The first looks at the crowded restaurant and thinks, the food must be good. The second thinks, I wonder what the profit margin is. The first sees a luxury watch. The second wonders who manufactures it, who owns the brand, and why people are willing to pay 10 times more than its production cost. They are walking through the same building, but mentally, they're living in completely different worlds. This is why wealthy people often seem curious about things that others ignore. They don't just observe the world, they analyze it. They ask, why does this business work? Why are customers loyal? What problem is being solved? Because every successful business exists for one reason. It creates value that people are willing to pay for. Once you begin thinking that way, you stop looking at money as something to earn. You begin looking at it as the result of solving problems. And that's a powerful shift. Because if money follows value, then the logical question becomes, how can I become more valuable? Not how can I get lucky? Not how can I become rich overnight? But what skills can I develop that people genuinely need? That single question has quietly built more wealth than most shortcuts ever promised. There's another habit that's easy to miss. Wealthy thinkers don't rush every decision. In today's world, speed is celebrated. Fast delivery, fast internet, fast success, fast profits. Everything is expected immediately. Yet, some of the most important financial decisions deserve the opposite: time. Think about buying a house, starting a business, changing careers, making a major investment. Those decisions can influence decades of your life. So why would anyone make them impulsively? The wealthiest investors in history weren't famous because they acted the fastest. They became successful because they spent time understanding what others overlooked. Patience isn't glamorous. It doesn't make headlines. But financially, it's often one of the most profitable habits a person can develop. Then there's another question wealthy people constantly ask themselves. What is the opportunity cost? Most people don't think in those terms. If they spend money, they think only about what they receive. Wealthy thinkers also think about what they gave up. Imagine spending $10,000 on a luxury purchase. The question isn't only, did I enjoy it? It's also, what else could that money have become? An investment, a business, a skill, a future opportunity. Every decision closes one door while opening another. The wealthy understand that every yes is also a no to something else. That's why they often appear more selective, not because they dislike spending, because they understand the hidden cost behind every decision. And perhaps that's the biggest lesson in this entire conversation. Rich people don't necessarily have access to different opportunities. Very often, they simply process the same opportunities differently. They ask different questions. They notice different patterns. They think further into the future. And over years, those small mental differences quietly become enormous financial differences. Because wealth rarely begins inside a bank account. It begins inside a way of thinking. And once the way you think begins to change, the way you live often follows. The investment most people never make. Let me ask you another question. If I gave you two choices, the first, I hand you a large amount of money today. The second, I give you the ability to create that same amount of money over and over again for the rest of your life. Which one would you choose? Most people instinctively choose the first option. It's immediate, visible, certain. But many wealthy people would choose the second, because they understand something that completely changes the way they think about money. Skills create income, assets create wealth, and the ability to create value can outlast almost any amount of money. Think about some of the world's most successful entrepreneurs. If they lost everything tomorrow, would they stay broke forever? Probably not. Why? Because their greatest asset was never their bank account. It was the way they think, their experience, their network, their reputation, their ability to identify opportunities that other people don't even notice. That's why some people lose millions and build them back, while others inherit millions and lose everything. The money wasn't the difference. The mindset was. And perhaps that's one of the most misunderstood ideas about wealth. People spend years trying to increase their income while spending very little time increasing themselves. They'll spend hours comparing prices before buying a phone, but they'll hesitate to buy a book, take a course, learn a new skill, or develop an ability that could increase their income for decades. It's fascinating when you think about it. People often invest more time researching a vacation than researching the skills that shape their financial future. Now don't misunderstand me. There's nothing wrong with enjoying life. Travel, experiences, entertainment, they all have value. But wealthy thinkers constantly ask one additional question. Will this improve my future? Not just today, not next week, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, because they're obsessed with one idea, compounding. Most people think compound growth only applies to investing. It doesn't. Knowledge compounds, skills compound, relationships compound, trust compounds, experience compounds, even your reputation compounds. Every conversation you have, every book you read, every mistake you learn from, every problem you solve, you're quietly becoming someone different. The results may not appear immediately. In fact, for a long time, it might feel like nothing is happening at all. But then something remarkable occurs. The small improvements begin connecting. One skill makes another skill more valuable. One opportunity leads to another. One relationship opens a door that wasn't there before. And suddenly, people around you think you've become lucky. What they didn't see were the hundreds of invisible investments that happened first. This is one reason wealthy people rarely become obsessed with shortcuts. Because they understand that shortcuts often disappear as quickly as they appear. Foundations last, skills last, character lasts, and those things continue producing value long after trends come and go. There's another interesting habit they develop. They stop asking, how much money can I make? And they begin asking, how difficult am I to replace? That's a powerful question, because the marketplace rewards people who solve difficult problems. If millions of people can do exactly what you do, your value becomes easier to replace. But if you develop rare combinations of skills, clear communication, creative thinking, leadership, problem solving, your value naturally increases. Notice something. We're no longer talking about money. We're talking about becoming more valuable, because that's where wealth usually begins. Not inside a wallet, inside a person. And perhaps that's the biggest shift of all. Rich people don't spend their lives chasing money. They spend their lives becoming the kind of people that money naturally follows. They understand that income is often the result, not the cause. The cause is value. The cause is growth. The cause is solving problems better than yesterday. And once you truly understand that, you stop asking, what's the fastest way to become rich? Instead, you ask a much better question. What kind of person do I need to become if I want lasting wealth? Because the answer to that question is often worth far more than money itself. The mindset that turns money into wealth. So far, we've talked about perspective. We've talked about better questions. We've talked about investing in yourself. But all of those ideas lead to one final realization. Money by itself doesn't create wealth. It simply amplifies the habits that already exist. Think about it. If someone struggles to manage a small amount of money, giving them a larger amount rarely solves the problem. It usually magnifies it. The same is true in the opposite direction. Someone who understands discipline, patience, long-term thinking, and value creation often continues building wealth no matter where they start. That's why wealth isn't just something people have. It's something they practice every single day, one decision at a time. Now, here's something I find fascinating. Most people believe wealthy individuals think about money all day. Ironically, many of them spend surprisingly little time thinking about money itself. Instead, they think about systems, processes, ideas, businesses, people, innovation, because they understand a simple principle. Money follows value. If you spend your entire life chasing money, you'll always be reacting. But if you spend your life creating value, money often becomes the consequence. Not immediately, not magically, but consistently. Imagine two people. The first wakes up every morning asking, how can I make more money today? The second wakes up asking, how can I become more useful today? At first, those questions seem almost identical, but over 10 years, they produce completely different lives. The first person often looks for quick opportunities. The second quietly builds lasting capability. One chases transactions. The other builds trust. One focuses on immediate income. The other focuses on long-term reputation. And here's something remarkable. Reputation compounds. People remember reliability. They remember honesty. They remember excellence. The person who consistently delivers value doesn't have to convince the world forever. Eventually, their work begins speaking for them. Opportunities start finding them. Recommendations increase. Doors begin opening. Not because they're lucky, but because trust has quietly become one of their greatest assets. Unfortunately, this is the part most people never see. They only notice the success at the end. They don't see the years of consistency that came before it. The mornings nobody applauded. The evenings spent learning. The failures that taught better judgment. The patience that never appeared on social media. We live in a culture that celebrates outcomes, but wealth is usually built through processes, and processes are rarely exciting. They're repetitive, sometimes even boring. Yet that's exactly why they work, because extraordinary results often come from ordinary actions, repeated consistently. Reading every day, learning every day, improving every day, making slightly better financial decisions every month. None of those habits feel life-changing in the moment, but together, they quietly reshape an entire future. Perhaps that's the greatest misunderstanding about wealthy people. Many assume they possess extraordinary discipline. In reality, many simply built ordinary habits they refuse to abandon. And those habits eventually became extraordinary results. So, Maybe the real difference isn't intelligence, or luck, or even starting conditions. Maybe it's consistency. The willingness to think long-term while everyone else is chasing immediate rewards. The willingness to become valuable before expecting to become wealthy. The willingness to keep improving when nobody is watching. Because in the end, wealth isn't built by one brilliant decision. It's built by thousands of decisions that nobody else considers important. And maybe that's why rich people appear to think differently. Not because they were born with a different brain, but because they trained themselves to see the world through a different lens. A lens focused on value instead of appearances, growth instead of comfort, ownership instead of consumption, and the future instead of the moment. If you enjoyed this video and want to better understand money, business, psychology, economics, and the hidden principles behind long-term wealth, make sure to subscribe to Nexeric. Every week, we explore ideas that challenge conventional thinking and help you build a deeper understanding of the modern financial world. And before you leave, I'd like to ask you one question. What do you believe is the biggest difference between the way wealthy people think and the way most people think? Share your thoughts in the comments. Some of the best ideas begin with conversations like these. Until next time, I'm Olivia Vale. Keep asking better questions. Keep learning. And remember, the way you think today shapes the wealth you build tomorrow.